Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Inspired in Berlin podcast. My guest today is Peter Griffiths. Peter is the co-founder, along with his partner Mira Griffiths, of The Mind Takeaway, a coaching and consultancy company focusing on leadership development and facilitating regenerative business practices that foster inclusive company cultures. Along with the consultancy, Peter and Mira also host their own podcast with the same name, The Mind Takeaway Podcast, where they host a bunch of wonderful guests. I'm sure we'll talk a bit about that as well. In his past lives, Peter has been a musician, as well as having held various leadership positions at various corporates. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So let's jump right in. What is The Mind Takeaway in your own words?
Well, it's actually evolving all the time, but I think the easiest, least path of resistance would be to say that it's a very humanistic approach to coaching and leadership development, and really all of the things that we see lacking innocently when companies start to grow. Or, for example, if you're a legacy company, like you said, I've had a corporate background, where suddenly people just go off the boil. They lose the human aspect of, for example, leadership, and they start to micromanage, or they don't support their people. So everything that we support our clients with, or companies or individuals, is around how can you get the human aspect back into leadership? How can we allow people to do more meaningful work? But also, there's nothing wrong with making profit and scaling up and innovating and creating new things. That's also great too. But in parallel, how can we make it regenerative? So I guess all of our work, whether we're coaching someone or doing leadership development for a company, it's to do all the wonderful things that companies are great at, but also not to suck out the life and the creativity and the human aspect of all of the things that they do,
Impressive. So what brought you to this? So you have been a musician, you have been in corporates. Tell us a bit about your journey.
Yeah, it's definitely a squiggly line. It's not the straight path that you read about. And honestly, none of this was ever planned. In fact, I only ever took a corporate gig, if I'm honest, to supplement and pay the rent, and also pay for my more creative things, like being a professional musician and touring and being a DJ and all of that. But I never really left the world of work. For whatever reason, I thought it was a good idea in parallel to always have some form of income from a job. And it just so happened that I didn't know this, but I liked that aspect of looking after people and leadership. And my first role many moons ago was to be a team lead, like a supervisor in an insurance company. And then I just realized that, okay, I can actually do this. Obviously, back then I made many mistakes, and I was definitely wet behind the ears. But that's it. I just ended up in lots of different roles as a manager, but in parallel, I was making music. I had my own studio. Like I say, I toured as a DJ, and then later on, I was in a live act. And even now, I make music, but not so much commercially, because I'm growing, obviously, a business, The Mind Takeaway. But actually, for me, this is my sanity check. So I still make music as a means of, my well-being and mental health. It really helps me. Yeah.
Sweet. We're going to come to music because I do want to get your take on creativity in regular life, let's say, for those of us who are not quite creative, or who think we are not. And you are a professional creative in that sense, having been there. Yeah. What makes somebody leave a corporate career? I understand that you have been interested in these kind of things, and you observed what was going on in there. But to take that leap, to make this career change, what is the driving force behind that?
Why would someone leave a job, you say, yeah?
Why would you leave and switch to coaching?
Well, for me personally, I left because, again, I guess you see this great migration going on, and it's a trendy label right now, right? What does that really mean? So for me, it was always a means to an end. It wasn't a bad thing. I didn't see the world of work as the devil or evil. But for me, it was a necessary thing to do, to be able to pay the rent, while it allowed me to do all the weird and wonderful things I was experimenting with, like trying to be a musician and making music and being entrepreneurial. So I actually think that in the modern world of work, I don't see a problem having a few gigs going on. People talk about side hustle, but I see quite often now people having a few jobs. But just to be clear, I don't think you should fill your life up with work, because that can be toxic and that can lead to burnout. But if you can find something that's meaningful to do while in parallel exploring all your needs and wants and experiments and things you're curious about, then why not? For me, sadly, the corporate world didn't allow me that aspect. So, for example, I'm not going to name the company, but my last role, it was a huge multinational, and eventually I got out of working full time. It took a while, and the company, if I'm honest, even though I was in a management role, they weren't comfortable with me working part time. So I unfortunately had to force this in Germany because it's under labour law, you know. And that caused some problems itself, and maybe the tipping point for me to accelerate myself out of that particular career. And sadly, that's the thing. I see COVID as a massive opportunity now for companies to offer lots of flexibility. And if you do that with your employees, no surprise, people are more creative, they're more relaxed, the mental health is better. They get a balance between family life and creativity and whatever they want to do. But also they show up in the role and they're better human beings. So they're probably therefore going to be more productive, right? So for anyone listening, I mean, I see many people leaving roles for quite simple things nowadays, that money isn't holding them in the role, although that's all important. It gives you options. They just don't see any meaning, you know, or for example, the values changed, especially during COVID. People now see their needs and wants, and things are very different than what they did maybe 25, 26 months ago. So now they're kind of waking up, you know, they've awoken from a slumber, and they're realizing that maybe they don't want to work for a company that's not so conscious or regenerative, or they've realized that what they're doing isn't meaningful to them personally. So they've gone off to start off their own company, you know, co-found some startup, or they may have just gone off and seen a hobby they want to do, and they've left it for so long, and they've realized that that's a passion, and they've gone away for a sabbatical or took a year out, you know. So, I mean, there's lots of different reasons. And especially when we speak to clients, you know, we're very curious. So we ask them, you know, why are you suddenly deciding you want to change? And it's not always a bad thing. It's like, you know, I've grown in the role and I've appreciated what this company's done, but I don't see that they've got anything further for me. So it's not that I'm leaving on bad terms, but now I've realized that I've got a passion. I want to grow a business, and this is something I'm going to try. So, yeah, it could be really exciting, or it could be sadly due to mental health, or it could be that, you know, sadly some people have got terrible bosses, you know, they might be micromanaged or bullied. So there's a whole myriad of things, and I don't really believe the whole media hype around it, that it's one thing or the other. I think there's lots of different things, but I think it's very personal to you as an individual. That's what it was for me. You know, it was, is it the right time? Yes, it is. I'm going to take the plunge. And Mira and I were experimenting for years while also being in paid roles before we took the plunge of going full time and growing a business. So, yeah.
Sweet. I see that joy and meaning are some things that carry a lot of weight in your life, and it sounds like this is what you're helping people discover as well, whether it is at work or outside of work. Now, when I talk to a lot of people in that early stage of trying to figure out what is it that gives meaning to their lives and where do they find joy, I notice a lot of hesitation, a lot of fear as well. How do people take this when you're working with them, and especially leaders? If you tell them what you just told me, I think one of the first things that goes off in their mind is, all right, my employees are just going to leave off, you know, and everybody's going to want to work part-time, and that's going to be it. So how do you work with that?
This is a great question. And being really honest, there's no silver bullet, right? I do understand employees, because I've been there. I've been in companies where, you know, depending on the actual industry and the role, there's only a certain amount of flexibility depending on what you do for a living, for example. But where I see the real problems, it's not in the jobs where they can't really allow that flexibility. Actually, far from it. I see that there's lots of roles where people, for example, my bosses, I'm not going to blame them, but so many roles in the past when I asked, you know, nicely, can I reduce my hours? Can I work from a different country, for example? Because I love traveling, no surprise. And I was always told no. But the reason for the no was never backed up with anything solid or meaningful. It was just like, get back in your, go back to your office and never ask me that again kind of thing. So I understand the fear, because it looks like if that flexibility is allowed, then maybe people will go off the boil, they won't be productive, they will leave in droves. But I can honestly say that the reason why the Great Migration is a real thing, especially in the US, is because people have now become more self-aware of their own value. And also the job market, let's be honest, it's definitely a job seekers market right now. Companies are constantly telling me that, what can we do to retain talent, but crucially attract high talent and the right people. I'm saying, well, be more flexible. So it might paradoxically look like something that's a really fearful thing to do, to allow wiggle room and allow people to leave and start a side hustle. In fact, the companies that we know that are really firing all cylinders and, they're amazing places to work, funny enough, are the ones that allow the most wiggle room for the employees to do whatever they want to do in their life. But crucially, they still show up and they do a great job. And, there's still a very clear role definition. There's KPIs. There's nothing wrong with that. There's still targets and needs and wants of the company. But it's also about setting clear boundaries as well. So as an employer, if you say, look, I really hear you, I see you, I value you, I respect you as a human being. What do you do outside of work? We want to know about your family. And the more that, for example, I got to know that as a leader, the more, funny enough, people show up, because it looks like you're listening to them. And if you really demonstrate that and build trust over time as an employer, as a leader, as someone who's running, the responsibility of looking after a team, people just want to work for you then. No surprise, because they know that that you've got kids. They know about your side hustles and gigs, and it's not something that's secretive. I mean, the amount of times I used to get in trouble in companies because I was a touring DJ, and I'd be like, oh God, I've got to tell HR that I'm a musician, and the stigma that used to carry in the past. Yeah. I mean, luckily now it's changing a lot. It's totally different for sure. But the amount of conversations I'd have, sleepless nights, I'm like, oh, I've got to tell my boss that I'm going to be away. And, to be fair, it was none of their business. But I always felt responsible as a leader. I'm doing this because I want to be transparent. And I used to practice that with my team. I'd share what I was doing without doing it, overkill and, telling people too much. You've got to find a baseline and, find a good fit for what, works for you as an employer. Also what works for your team. For example, there's been transparent and then there's spilling your guts about everything. And that doesn't work either, because you can really scare the life out of people and, inject fear by being too transparent, for example. So it's finding what works, but also, it has to be a good fit for your organization. It has to be a good fit for the individuals. But the only way you can see what's right is by asking the right questions and listening to people. So going back to what you said, I mean, sorry, we've gone around the houses with it. But yeah, allowing flexibility and allowing people to go part-time, if it makes sense for the role, of course, will allow people to have better well-being, better mental health. And crucially, when they show up to do the role that you're paying them for, no surprise, they're actually going to be better humans. They're going to be more focused. And they'll find more meaning in what they do. Because you can't force it. Gone are the days of, for example, command and control. This old, horrible, clunky, dated factory style of leadership has to go now. It's sadly still hanging on. But like I say, if you offer flexibility and you value people, no surprise, you will pay less in replacing high talent who leaves, because anyone that's good at what they do, to be honest, I know this was for me and the people I used to manage, that they only used to go when they realised that they weren't valued anymore, or they were not listened to, or they were marginalised, and they would leave in the droves. But the people that were listened to and valued, and the company, even though it was never perfect, right, you could see that the company was trying to have those tough conversations about mental health and about, if things aren't working with the product, or, for example, quite often another reason I've just remembered why people leave is because simple as could be the process. So I was speaking to a company the other day, and their account manager and customer service people were leaving burnt out, and their mental health was suffering. And it wasn't because of weak leadership or bad line management. It's because some of the key processes, for years, the key staff were saying, we need to change this. We want to be empowered. We want to be able to give more to our accounts if things break as they do naturally, and we feel powerless. So if I feel powerless in my role, aside from everything else that's going on, it's affecting my mental health. And the company was a massive insight for them because they just ignored it for so long. But as soon as they did a bit of re-engineering on the processes, no surprise, people were like, actually, I found more meaning in my role. And it didn't cost that much money. It didn't require an initiative to bring in, mental health this or do a diversity, equity, inclusion plan. Not that they're important, but it was more about, okay, what quick fixes can bring a better quality of life to me while I'm in the job. And it also helped the customers, because the customers were no surprise. They were like, wow, you're not telling me no this time. You're allowed to fix it. And so the feedback was coming in thick and fast that it was helping not only the customers at the top line, but it was also helping, as I said, the mental health and well-being, because the people that were doing the tough work of customer service and account management, because let's be honest, it's a tough gig sometimes, right? Trying to please everyone while also aligned with the company's processes and needs and wants and all of that.
Yeah. So much to unpack there. I suppose there's a lot of research now that shows that happier people are more productive. And perhaps from the business point of view, even if we start from that point, it is still a win-win situation, even if the business is thinking about the impact on the bottom line. And I guess the way to put it into practice is, as you say, kind of seeing the whole person and allowing the whole person to be there in whatever configuration that might end up being. It might just be that you have a full-time job, but the company allows you to have your side gigs and acknowledges that, kind of having a sense of belonging. Because the other opposite of that would be, I have my life outside of work, and at work I am a emotionless robot.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, I totally agree, because it looked like that for so long, right? The world of work was don't bring your person into work. And I was told that in early roles. It's like, you must be a robot. And I even become Mr. Pete corporate. And it actually, some of my early roles, I always share this. I'm chuckling now because I become such an arse. I'm very serious and wooden and tried to be corporate. And I just, for the life of me, I wasn't very good at that. And what I realized quite early on was that if I didn't bring my personality into the role, even though there are rules, there's things that have to be done, and I had to, a particular role to do, and there's only so much wiggle room, that doesn't mean to say that you can't bring the human aspect into it. And the more human you are, and the more that you're open, saying, I'm not an oracle, I'm your boss, but I'm not perfect. So if I make a mistake, let's be transparent enough. And yes, I will feel uncomfortable when you tell me I've done a crap job, but I'd rather know than, what sadly happens is people stop being listened to, and then they go off the boil. They start to behave in the way that the company doesn't want them to do, and then they start to talk behind the back of their leaders, and it gets it to be really toxic. And then in some cases, sadly, some organizations we've helped in the past where they were getting told nothing. Their employees had given up so much and were in such a bad state and low trust that they stopped giving any feedback at all. So for me, when I'm working with younger leaders especially, I'm saying, look, if you're getting feedback, yes, I know it's a challenge, and having tough conversations, it takes a lot of practice and courage and vulnerability to hold your own in a meeting if people are really annoyed and saying everything's shit. It's a tough gig, right? But I'd rather have that in spades every day of the week than going into a meeting where everyone's like, yes, boss, just nodding dogs, as you say, robotic. And when you're saying, everything good, and everyone's just going, yes, when in the back of your mind, if you dig deep and you're honest with yourself, that it's obviously not. And that's what we instill in leadership development when we work with individuals, especially, or teams, or even the full organization, is all feedback is useful and meaningful. And it's to be able to be a good coach to work out, when you get that feedback in thick and fast, is that really true? They could be saying the coffee's rubbish and all of that, but what they really want is that they want the middle managers to be supported better. And the only way you're going to know that for sure is to keep digging deeper, have some town halls and all of the stuff that takes a lot of time. And let's be honest, it's a lot of hassle. It doesn't look like for most leaders that that's something that's important. But for people listening, it's just listening. That's the biggest thing that costs no money. And one of the things that escapes most leaders and gets them into trouble is when they make assumptions or think that they know what their team wants versus just asking them,
Yeah, it's about relationships, right?
Yeah.
We hear so much about when a relationship breaks down, it is often the communication that breaks down first. Things start piling up, and there's a bad mood, nobody's happy. And the first time you talk, perhaps the fight becomes about the dishes that need to be done. But it's never really about the dishes. It is about something else that's been brewing up. And it takes a lot of effort to go back and keep digging, as you say, to get to those core things that are causing the friction. And along the way, perhaps there's this relationship building where people feel listened to. Yeah. And as you say, I guess authenticity and vulnerability go hand in hand. You cannot separate the two.
No, that's great what you said there. Yeah, you can't. And we've all tried, right? And that's the thing. I put my hand up, in earlier roles, I tried to hide away from it, because it felt deeply uncomfortable and I felt exposed. But as soon as I got comfortable with being uncomfortable, I know it might sound a bit weird, but that's all it is. When there's dissent, when people don't agree with your opinion, it will be tough. But I'd rather have that and be course corrected naturally by my team than me thinking I know everything. And, individual humans, we're all guilty of blind spots and unconscious biases, and we can all make mistakes. And the more leaders that show up and say, I'm just as guilty as everyone, I might be your boss, but you as a team, I know it might sound cheesy, but it's the truth. Collectively, as a community, if you want to build trust, it's about listening to each other, but knowing that you're going to be in disagreement. In fact, when we do work with teams to get them into high performance, we show them straight away that it's never like the textbook. It's not sexy. In fact, it's very unsexy. A high trust team, you can walk in and it might look like they're killing each other, and there might be a lot of dissent. Oh, I don't like you, but a heated discussion. But like I said before, that's actually high psychological safety. And if you've got the right leader in place that can facilitate that and say, okay, we've got a bit heated, let's rewind. Everyone loves each other. Let's remember that. Okay, we've got this side thinking this. If you can unpack that. And it is uncomfortable. And it used to be like, oh, God, here we go. I used to go into meetings thinking, thinking what's going to happen. But like I said before, if you can get comfortable with that, it becomes normal. That's normal, right? Abnormal is a lack of trust where people, as you said, they're not in dialogue, they're not talking, and then everyone's second-guessing each other up in their own head. Terrible place to be, because I'd rather just ask you, right? If I didn't know what was going on, I'd just say, look, I'm confused. I don't know about you. Let's have a chat. Let's put all of our needs and wants on the table, and let's talk about it. It's not going to be sexy. It will be a bit messy. We might annoy each other, but I'd rather have that than 6 months down the line realize that we've just destroyed our relationship, and where we could have been cultivating it, we've just ignored each other. For example, I used to work in teams before where most of my role wasn't really helping my team because I got them in a good place. Sadly, it was coaching my peers, and I didn't want that role, if I'm honest. But this is why I guess I start the Mind Takeaway with Mira, because what did I love about the corporate world? Exactly what we're talking about. How do you develop trust? How do you coach people? How do you become a good mentor and stuff like that? And I realized that sadly, that was the only bit that I loved from corporate. The rest of it, all the other stuff. And not that it's bad, it's just that I realized that that's what I was passionate about. And that's what we instill in leaders, learn to listen, learn to be a good coach, be comfortable with allowing people to give you feedback, crucially give them feedback as well. But also don't do it like this textbook, the textbook thing or tick box exercise where, we've all seen it before innocently. I'm going to give you feedback. And, and it's this really clunky model that they're using, and it's clear that it's not cool. As soon as they've opened their mouth, you're just like, I'm not listening. Rather than naturally being, what's just occurred to me? This has been going on. I don't know if you'd noticed this was happening in the team. Have you noticed it? Rather than it being a personal attack on someone and say, you're not doing your job. What do you do to make it better? And that's what we see quite often innocent leaders do. They're like, right, I'm going to tell you. And then they come back and say, they're not doing what I want. And I'm like, well, why do you think that is? Okay, it felt like a personal attack. Yeah, if you make it less personal, it's not about you're right and he's wrong or she's wrong, all of that. It's about just sitting down and having an open discussion and saying to each other, I'm willing to be wrong. And usually when I give feedback, it's like, this is going on and you've behaved like this. but I'm also willing to be open to the fact that maybe I've missed something. What's going on for you? And then the person's like, well, I've had a really shitty time outside of my job. I've got family problems. I'm getting divorced. And then straight away you're like, wow, I wish I'd asked that 2 weeks ago, because now it makes total sense. Okay, I've got you back. I'm sorry to hear that. Okay, let's give you some wiggle room while you sort your personal problems out. But sadly, what I see managers doing quite often is just innocently micromanaging. You know, person X just goes off the boil. So what makes sense straight away, the least path of resistance for most managers early on, rookie, is to just push someone in a direction they don't want to go in without asking them why they stopped doing the job in the first place, you know?
Yeah, it's crazy, right? Because there is this dominant way of being. There are certain mental models in the industry, in the business world, that have that people have taken on unquestioningly. Some of the earliest organizations were military organizations, and it seems that mental model kind of went on for about 150, 200 years, where if somebody's in a higher position than you, then you do not question, and they do not feel the need to ask for feedback. And as organizations have been changing and work gets more creative and not just militaristic, there's a bit of a cognitive dissonance that comes in where people start to feel something is not quite right.
Yeah, I totally agree. And cognitive dissonance, it's an interesting one, because when you experience it, me included, you're holding on to this old belief system, this old paradigm, but suddenly you've got new information that's pushing through that ceiling, saying, hey, there's another way, right? And that's what I'm seeing. I'm excited, and no surprise, this is why we're passionate, Mira and I, what we do with the Mind Takeaway, is that there is another way. And that other way is, and again, to people that listen, it might sound wooey, but listening, being reflective, being vulnerable, it's all things that we are naturally good at as humans. So why push that down? Why not allow that naturally to build in you while you do your job, right? And that's it. You just forgot to be human beings first and foremost. And no surprise, you know, and you said it before, when we come in and robotic and pretend to be an algorithm, because as you know, I mean, as much as I love technology, I've tried to be algorithmic in the past. We've been being a musician, you know, not checking in, not sleeping well, pushing the hours too much. And guess what? I burnt myself out. I went off a cliff. And when managers forget that their people are not humans first and foremost, and they look at them as commodities and put them through a meat grinder, what happens? No surprise. You know, you only get so much value from doing that. And then, as we've seen, that's why there's this massive migration of people desperately looking for something more meaningful, something more aligned to their needs and wants and their values now. And crucially, why would you not want to be selfish and be around your family? And I don't know if you thought about this, but I'm sorry, I may be going off on a different tangent, but
please.
I see people who are really aligning and putting boundaries in place to be more with their family and their friends and their, you know, the side hustle. I don't see that as selfish, because if you do that, it's more holistic. It rounds you off as a human being. And no surprise, like I said before, when employees in the past were being flexible, and it did happen, if I'm honest, when I worked in a telco in the past, they knew that I was actually doing gigs at the weekend, and, you know, there was a concern naturally, because I would be, you know, what kind of state is Peter going to come in after playing at a festival all weekend? Is he going to be at his best when he's doing his, you know, when he's got his teams back? But having that transparency and having that discussion means that if I did go off the boil, my manager then has full, you know, a full call to action to have that discussion and have a two-way street with it, versus, you know, telling someone they can't do something and then you're stifling them. So, you know, if you're not allowing people to do what they need to do in their life, they're not really going to show up and do a great job. They're not going to be productive. And humans, being humans, you know, they need to address all of these things. You know, if your well-being's slipped and you're not sleeping or you're not getting to spend time with your family and you're bullied to do, for example, overtime, simple things, right? There's a lot of roles, sadly, where people are bullied to work more hours than they would ever want or need. And they don't even need the money, but there's this toxic environment where, well, half the team's working another 10 hours this week, you're going to have to do it as well. And then they end up sadly not spending time with the partner, with the kids or whatever else they need. And then suddenly 6 months down the line, for example, companies don't realize it. It causes more sickness. It costs
Yeah.
billions every year, and it requires more services of people going to the doctor, sadly, for, seeing counselors or needing a coach or stuff like that. So there's massive cost implications where companies, as we talked about, are just not listening or being flexible. And I don't buy into it where people say, I've had clients in the past saying, prove it to me. I'm like, no, I love you. And don't take this the wrong way, but if I've got to prove this to you, then actually you're going to have to go off and reflect on that, because there isn't any employer right now, especially after COVID, that should have to be, we should have to prove that this is the way forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, all the data's there. And actually in our business, we're getting a bit more data focused, because where companies are still like, yeah, I'm on the fence, rather than try and sell it or prove it to them, we're just like, well, here's the data for your industry. If you don't, the implications are, well, first and foremost, you might not be in business in the next half decade, because all of your top talent will have gone. If you do not offer all of these things, and if I'm honest, they're not actually cost, they're not really things that are super costly. Allowing people to work different hours can be factored in as you scale up. Providing the services of mental health, first aid or whatever it is, it can all be factored into the way that the company grows. And sadly, you've probably seen this. I was going to ask you as a co-founder, that world is really exciting, right? Being an entrepreneur and starting your own business. But sadly, mental health seems to be pushed all the way down in priorities, right? So it's looking at that from day one now. So if you're going to start a business, what we always coach people with is, okay, that's fantastic. Well done for taking the plunge. What about your mental health? What about the impact on your family and outside of work? And I don't want to say balance, because that's a bit off. I don't think there's any such way. It's always going to be moving. It's going to be always fluid. So just take it into account. What are the implications of you doing it? There's all the excitement and all of the things you want to do, but what implications are there by, if you suddenly get sucked into working too much, or you get stressed out and, you've got to get funding and you've got to do all of these things that you didn't think you were going to do. How is that going to affect you as an individual human? So what are the implications on outside of work? And the more co-founders and entrepreneurs that look at that, go figure, the better the results. And actually, it's more scalable, it's more regenerative. And as you pointed to, it smashes through these old paradigms. It won't make sense for you to do that old command and control of, I'm going to tell you what to do as the co-founder. I don't want you to think, just bloody do it. Because that can work for maybe a couple of months. But, 6 months, 2 years down the line, if no one's using the mind, imagine there's no innovation, all the creativity's been sucked out. No one actually moves unless you tell them to do something. That's a dangerous game, right?
Absolutely, and I do see. I'm really happy that this shift is happening. So more and more people realizing, and the tech industry has been at the forefront of this, of that work is a collaborative effort. It's a team sport, and the more people are engaged, the better business results you get, but also you feel good. And this kind of divide between non-emotional, robotic work life, command and control, actually has long-term implications. And recently, the big shift that I see, and I'm truly grateful for that, is that more and more people realize that you also can't go at it alone, that there's a need for coaches, and that there's a lot of value to be had. And again, I think the tech industry is probably the industry that spends a lot of money on this. All sorts of various trends. Agile coaching is a household name when it comes to tech. And these are people who are basically helping you do better by helping you bring your total self to work one way or another. Whatever the configuration could be, as you say, the balance. Your balance is different from my balance. I'm somebody who loves to work, and I need to have a lot of that. If you prefer to be alone and make music, or go do a gig with your friends, well, that's what creates balance for you. So I'm really happy about this thing, that more and more people are reaching out, and that there are more people like you, like Mira, and many others who are there to support based on the experience and everything you have learned. I'm curious, when leaders come to you, what are some of the first things they say to you, and how do you get them started on this journey of awareness? Because it does take time to get through to the core issues.
Well, there's lots of different stages, right? And yeah, I mean, it's good that you said that, because for me, awareness is everything, for because it's really useful to be self-aware. It's a good starting point for sure, right? But even me included, I don't see as, okay, I'm aware, I've got no learning. So for me, it's a constant exploration and curiosity and growth. So the first thing we do, if someone approaches me and says, I want to be a better leader, I'm like, okay, for what purpose?
Right.
And the reason I asked that, I'm not trying to be a smart horse. It's more like, what's going on now? So it's just, again, listening to that person and saying, what's, for me, it's Mira and I, it's getting a baseline of where that person's at. What are their needs and wants, and, what are they passionate about? And then it's always different. So one leader, for example, we work with lately is they've stepped up into a more senior role, and it's gone from more of a governmental to a private company. So there's lots of different, lots of growing pains with doing that. But it's great that they reached out for a coach now, because that's a good thing. And then there's times when, for example, leaders might reach out to us when things are, pardon my French, but the shit's hit the fan, and they suddenly, the team doesn't like them, or it could be an organization that says, our middle managers, there's a lot of low trust, what could we do? But again, the same thing, it's like, okay, well, what made you reach out? I know that there's that going on, but if we were to help you, what would that look like? Because for me, it's always about, what results you're looking for. So it could be a myriad of things, but usually it's like, I want to be a better human. No surprise, right? Because they realized, like we all did, me included, when I was a fledgling people manager, you have to make mistakes, and that's okay. But as long as there's a willingness, as we talked about, to be vulnerable and put your hand up and say, okay, that didn't work. Sorry about that. And actually, not being over apologetic, but just having that conversation with your team and saying, okay, I didn't have your back last week because I was getting bashed by my boss and I was under a lot of pressure. Sorry, I don't want to apply that pressure to you, right? I was just speaking to a good friend, and he's a director in a software company, and he hit the nail on the head, because he was talking about how, it's good being transparent, but sometimes you can share too much, we talked about before. So it's just finding that baseline, I guess. And
yeah, I think it's a beautiful place to start. This is what I also find, especially now in my last gig has been purely coaching, and I think there's a lot of parallels also in my past jobs. Coaching was the part that I enjoyed the most because it brought the best out of people. And one of the things I see is people having a hard time expressing what is it that they want. Because again, in companies we have bought the Kool-Aid, the templates, the KPIs, and oftentimes we are not very clear about them. So just asking somebody what is it that you really truly want is can be something that they haven't thought about. They might give you, I just want people to be more productive, for my team to take more responsibility. Okay, what does that mean? And it takes kind of working with them to get to what is it that they want. And I suppose just to kind of add the other perspective, leadership is a lonely place to be.
It is.
And the stakes are high. So I can really imagine that there's a lot of fear around it, the fear of making mistakes, because people are also looking up to you to make the right decisions.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a tough gig. And as you know, the further you've been a co-founder, it can be tough because it's all on you. If you're a director or you're in the C-suite, it looks like everything has to be, it's a lot of responsibility. But as we talked about, if you're listening to people, if you're collaborating, if you're building a community, rather than just seeing it as a separate thing as a business, I think all of the best businesses, correct me if I'm wrong, are actual really nice communities where people feel like they're part of something. Like I said, it's more aligned to the values, and it's just in tune with their needs and wants. And, it's never going to be silver bullet, harmonious, everything's perfect, far from it. But if you've got a community and a sense of community while you're in the role itself, you're more likely to be able to deal with things as they happen. And when things go off the boil, it can be course corrected, and there's open discussion around it. So going back to what you're saying before, I mean, quite often leaders, they do come to us for, I'm feeling fearful, I'm uncomfortable, I don't want to feel that anymore. But actually,
Yeah.
what we do is help them, as we said before, is just get comfortable being fearful and actually being okay, being vulnerable. And it does take courage, it's not going to happen overnight. It took me years to get comfortable, like I said, not wanting to run away, and going head on and leaning into those tough conversations, or, being in a room and not knowing and being under pressure and not knowing the outcome, but still being in the room and willing to show up and like, okay, let's talk about it. But all of the best decisions I made came out of collaboration, if I'm honest. I did, for example, if I'm getting paid the big bucks, you do sometimes have to make tough decisions in isolation.
Yeah.
But quite often, as we talked about, I had a coach, always had coaches in my life. I don't believe that if you are a coach and you're not working on yourself, something's off, right? Mia and I have a business coach right now. We're always, learning new things. But like I said before, I think it's a constant journey. So when we work with someone, first and foremost, we say, are you open for growth? And we unpack what that looks like. And then, like we say, we ask a lot of questions around, okay, what is it that you're, having trouble with? And it could be, I'm fearful. I feel like an imposter. I'm in a new role and I don't feel like I can do it, which is totally natural.
Yeah.
If I was to tell you and your listeners, I feel like I'm an imposter most weeks and months, but I also, because I'm so comfortable with it, and I got comfortable, for example, as a musician, appearing on a stage thinking, oh God, I'm going to make a mistake. People are going to laugh at me. This could be a horrible gig. But I just leaned into it. But that doesn't mean that it won't be uncomfortable, and it doesn't mean you're going to have days where sometimes you're not clear of mind or you can't see the wood for the trees. So but that's it. It was just like, okay, so if I was to help you as a coach with imposter syndrome, what would that look like? And as we talked about before, your needs and wants change. As your awareness grows, your shopping list of things, if you came to me as a leader and wanted help of a coach, I would imagine when your awareness increases, quite often, no surprise, their needs and wants, their shopping list of things that they want help with from a coach changes. So that's why we love what we do, because usually there's a few remedial things like, I don't know how to build trust. Imposter syndrome, or for example, I don't know where my boundaries are. So quite often we share a lot on our podcast about how to set boundaries. What we were talking about before, dissent is one of my favorite topics, where leaders think that there's something wrong because people are disagreeing with them. And then I always set the clock for them and say, well, if they're not disagreeing with you, like we said, something's off. If you value your opinion so much, what about all of the wonderful new information and insights that you're missing by not learning? And they're like, oh, and then it's exploring that. So just like a good leader, a good coach, all we do, it's quite simple. We listen, we build a bit of trust, and then we coax in a loving way. What else do you want to work on? And then once we see that they've got some insights and they've got some courage and they've made a few incremental steps forward, we're like, okay, this is cool. Look what you've done. What else can we work on? So usually I'm quite open to seeing where it goes, because we have a good idea, Mia and I, a baseline of what's going to happen with a person, but we're always blown away by, as soon as they become more self-aware, no surprise, they're like, okay, I've got confidence now. This is sorted in my life. My team love me again. What else can we do? And actually that's the more exciting stuff, because it starts off being remedial, but if you want to become a next level leader, if you constantly work on yourself and you're open to more growth, you can start to address stuff before it becomes a problem. And that's the most exciting work we do with the more senior leaders, because they've already got a bit, more mileage. They've already made the mistakes growing companies and all of that. And they've got to a point where they've hit this ceiling where they're like, I don't know how to grow anymore. So it's not about problem solving for them as such. It's more about, okay, how can we become better humans, as we said? How can I spend more time with family, but still, deal with all this massive responsibility and risk and uncertainty and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's beautiful. I was talking to another guest on the podcast yesterday. We were recording, and we came to this thing of every good thing that you do for yourself that brings you in a place of higher awareness kind of invites the next thing. And that journey is never, it never pans out as you might have imagined it when the day you start. But kind of that openness and seeing more that there is to be discovered, it just turns it into something beautiful. And the other thing it reminds me of is from my favorite mindfulness teacher, let's say, John Kabat-Zinn. This is how I discovered mindfulness reading his book. His first book was titled Full Catastrophe Living. And I love that title because what you're saying is kind of leaders kind of go on this journey of full catastrophe leadership. It starts off remedial, we want to reduce the stress or kind of feel a bit more engaged, but then you start discovering more. What are some examples of these transformational experiences or insights that you see that kind of also perhaps give you that feedback and positive feeling of you making a difference in people's lives?
Well, yeah, it's not for me to say whether I'm a good coach or not, right? And it was the same for me in the leadership role. I didn't ever say I'm a leader. It's tongue in cheek for me. It's like if your team say, well done, great, but you're a good boss, that's fantastic. But I tried not to make that assumption, I'm great at what I do. But we all innocently get sucked into that for ego, right? But yeah, some of the big transformations has been, for me, when I know we're doing a good job, Mira and I, it's when it's not so much the feedback, whether that's great, being told as a coach that, thank you, or, in the mentorship piece I'm doing right now, people saying, I really value this. It's been really useful. But when I can actually see, so it's actually dialogue aside, when I can actually see them living, breathing experientially in the role and doing amazing things. And I can see that their people are lit up and, behaviorally things are happening. And there's not so much clunky course correction, and they're just following the nose. So for me, I see leadership as a very deeply creative endeavor. People don't see that, right? And I didn't for years until I realized, I'm a musician. Why was I getting good leverage as a leader? Because I was doing exactly what I was doing when I was performing, for example, which, if any good DJ or any good person in a band, you're listening to the audience, right? So I got really in tune with seeing the needs and wants of people. And that, I guess, was a happy accident to being a musician for many years. So quite often with clients, it's great getting the feedback and, it's like, thank you. I don't feel fearful anymore. And, there's quite obvious things that they might say. So, for example, where we've helped people set boundaries, I've seen that they've resolved stuff with the family, for example, because they've suddenly stopped the toxic smashing the hours, and then they've started to have meaningful dialogue and built trust with their own family. So quite often, this, when I said about the shopping list, and this is why we love what we do, is because I know that, it starts off, course correction, shit's hit the fan. I want to resolve this before I get into real trouble or lose my job or people hate me or all of that. And then suddenly they resolve that in work, and no surprise, it starts to trickle outwards into their work life. And, their friendships get better. As we talked about earlier in the conversation, they suddenly start cultivating relationships on the family and romantic side. So everything they do as a leader, if they're willing to grow, and they can see the results experientially, because we can all talk about, the 7 steps to leadership and read a textbook or go on training. Nothing wrong with that. But I'd honestly say, not me, I'm not saying me directly, but any good coach, it's about showing a way forward and shining a light for someone on a path that probably wasn't well lit. And it's just a few steps forward. And then that person seeing that momentum and them stepping forward without the need of you there. Because that's for me the regenerative bit. Any good coach, it's like, look, I can tell you what to do, but let's explore your options. So when the client starts to say, right, I know my options are, and they're guiding us, and we're having a two-way street, that's when I know we're doing, there's value in there, because they've started to show the coach where they want to go next. Whereas before it was very... Usually when we work with younger leaders, it's everything. How do I give feedback? How do I delegate? How do I communicate? All of the things that constitute, you would think, leadership development. But afterwards, once that stuff is naturally, working in the background, it's usually more about how do I show up more and give myself more self-care? How do I carve more time out my month to be listening to my team more and attune? How do I cultivate a relationship with the rest of the leadership team? How do I stop being in a silo? They're the more advanced things. Like, we've got lots of stuff as a product team here, but how do I work with marketing and other parts of the business so I don't annoy them, and what's the impact of this product being launched this week? What are the implications if we all work together and rather, head down and just protecting your own unit? Because let's be honest, I see quite often rookie mistakes I made as well, go into war with other departments because you were protecting your own people, and then innocently later on realizing that actually that's not where it's at. You know, there's a lot of course correction. Sorry, okay, we've been selfish. Let's get in a room together and work out, you know, how can we stop treading on each other's toes and stuff like that, I guess. Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I recently worked with a coachee of mine who was very interested in these things, and he puts in a lot of effort, and he created a really nice environment within his team while everybody complained about the rest of the company. And the thing we ended up working on was, well, what is the next step for you? That it is actually to now take off these boundaries and share this with the rest of the organization. This is where you will get the next burst of growth. And I think it's beautiful. Every bit of work that we do with people to help them become more of themselves, in a way, is leading up to what we also talk a lot about, leading by example, right? So this becomes the example for the other people around them, and in some way they also share a bit of the coaching experience they have, and it's not just the benefit for that one person or the specific set of people, but for everybody around them, and that is truly beautiful.
Yeah, when you can do that and share that outwards, so, you know, your insights, your growth, it's amazing. It's the most regenerative thing you can do. I mean, not just leaders, but employees. Once you protect and nurture and grow and cultivate relationships with single employees before they're leaders, imagine they start to self-correct each other. Like, for example, again, it wasn't like, oh, I'm an amazing boss, but once I, you know, could unpack what is trust, what does a high performance team really look like in practice rather than all the BS in the textbook version, right? And then you see it working. Like I said, forget the talk about it. You can just see it naturally working in the background, and then you can see people being self-leaders. Mira and I's biggest passion now is to coax, and it's going to happen for sure, but it's still a long way off, if I'm honest, is to get employers and entities and companies really warmed up to the fact that if they start to give everyone leadership development at a certain, you know, basic stage, later on, they're going to already have a great legacy. They're going to already have a succession plan, no surprise. And that, you know, where they don't need micromanaging and they want natural leadership, because everyone says they want it, right? But I don't see companies, if I'm honest, really putting their money where their mouth is. So when I see companies saying, right, you're not a leader yet, but actually we're going to give you training development around basic leadership development because we want you to have more autonomy and empower yourself. Because I don't know if you've thought about this, but empowerment isn't me as a leader saying you're empowered. I don't know if you thought about this, but when you employ someone, they're already empowered, right? Straight out of the gate. And there's a mismatch. And I always have quite heated discussions with employers around it because they're like, well, it's my permission as a gatekeeper, as an employer, to say whether you're empowered. I'm like, no. If you've employed them in their top talents, surely they're out, straight out the gate. Give them that room and that nurture and growth to go and do amazing things. And as you said, when people get given that bit of growth from the coach, they're more willing to go and share those insights. And then you see it naturally being shared out and there's a ripple effect. And then you don't have to put your hand in the machinery. It's already just natural,
Yeah, it's a beautiful process to watch. And I'm glad you mentioned this. My favorite quote comes from Patty McCord, who was a long-term HR leader at Netflix. And in her book, Powerful, she says this: people already have power. All you can do as a leader is to get out of the way and to nurture that and nurture the expression of that. And I think that's beautiful. And perhaps it's a good segue to the topic of creativity, because I imagine it takes a lot of creativity to craft the right experience and the right nurturing experience for your coachees or for your employees or people working with you, including your peers. Now, I'm going to share a quote on creativity with you, and then I'm going to ask you what is your definition of creativity. Mine comes from Elizabeth Gilbert. She wrote Eat, Pray, Love, a bunch of other books, and I loved her book Big Magic, which is all about creativity, and she inspires people to think creatively, regardless of whether they think of themselves as creatives or not. So the quote is, the book starts with the question, what is creativity? And the answer is, the relationship between a human being and the mysteries of inspiration. And for me, it's kind of almost like a Zen koan, the relationship between a human being and the mysteries of inspiration. What do you feel about creativity? What comes to your mind?
Well, great. Thanks you share that, Claude, because I love Big Magic, by the way.
Oh, wow,
I
sweet.
share that book with clients because it's such a wonderful read, right? And actually, she's a wonderful person, Elizabeth Gilbert. I love everything she does. To be fair, I wasn't really into Eat, Pray, Love, but then when I got to more curious about her as a creative human being, I mean, wow, every talk I hear, I'm just hooked, you know? So for me, creativity, I see it as pure. I mean, if you think about it this way, so psychologically, as humans, we create everything moment to moment. So for me, creativity is just showing up. You know, it's pure curiosity. You know, it's the embodiment of having an amazing life. And the more that we explore that with our clients, no surprise, they're like, what, I'm creating my feelings, even the shit stuff, like, you know, the anxiety of fear, it's all made up, right? And not that it isn't real at the time, but when you see that, it's like, okay, what about the good stuff? And I'm like, and then it gets them really excited and really curious. And that, you know, opens the path for them to go, okay, if I can create such a mess so easily, what can I do with all of that power?
Wow.
And just for it, even if they see the shaft of the light, like I know so many humans who tell me, adults, by the way, not kids, because kids are deeply creative, right, as you know. But quite often, adults sadly tell me, leaders are like, yeah, I'm not creative. I'm in a marketing team and we've got all this pressure, but I don't feel creative. I'm like, well, did you do that? And then as soon as I get curious about what they do, you know, whether it's in their personal life or what they do in the role, take me through it. And I'm like, I'm creative. And then as soon as they see the possibility that everything is creative, imagine the power that you know, we all sit on. And that's why Gilbert is so powerful in what she said, because it switched so many people onto the possibility that creativity is that natural. It's not just for artists. It's not for the few, which innocently it's said so much in popular books and all of that. I see every human as being deeply creative. And if you can lovingly coax that out of them and open that possibility that that's the case, because usually they tell me, no. And then weeks later, they're like, I've just done this. And I'm like, wow, isn't that creative? And they're like, yeah, you've got a point now. Maybe I can see a way forward. And so many of my colleagues I used to have in my teams would say to me, I've run out of steam. And I see creativity as a brick wall as well. So Gilbert talked about this as well, you know, when you get to that point where you've lost it and you think there's nothing left, that's the most exciting bit for me, especially as a creative, as a coach, as a musician. Okay, I don't know what to do. And then suddenly, bam, inspiration strikes. Maybe not when you want it, right? Could be in the shower, could be when you're working out, could be when you're buying eggs in a shop. It's annoying. Sometimes creativity, that lightning hits you when you least expect it. But if you're open to the fact that it's always there, then it doesn't really matter, right? Because you're always going to have an answer at some point.
Beautiful. So we're coming up to the end of our hour. I'm going to give it up to you to say a few words for our listeners, whether they are leaders or people trying to become creative. What advice would you give to anybody listening out there?
Well, to be fair, I'm not one for advice these days because, like I said, any good coach would be more about allowing people the options and seeing the way forward when maybe they were just a bit lost at sea or they had too much going on. So the only thing I would say is just for anyone out there who aspires to be a better human or a better leader, exactly what we were just talking about, listen more to yourself, to your wants and needs, to your body, to your mind. But also, crucially, listen to everyone around you. Get super curious. And that in itself will put you in good stead and put you on a great starting point, a great solid foundation to become a better leader. And that's about all I can say, because I think I've said too much.
No, Peter, it's never enough. I think we'll have to do a bunch more because there's a lot more to this. Thank you for this wonderful message.
I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.
I think we're going to end here. Thank you again. I wish you a beautiful weekend and see you soon.
Thank you.
Ciao.